and share screen with an arrow on it. Yes, yes, the sharing is coming up.
Find the window.
There you can choose the PPT if it is open, or yes, you can go ahead with sharing your entire window. Not a problem. Yes, sir. The PPT has come up. Yes.
It is audible now.
Yes, yes. The PPT is visible and you are audible.
Okay.
Yes, it has come in the full screen mode as well. So, sir, whenever you say, we can commence with the session by giving an introduction of you to the participants and we can commence. We still have 5 minutes. So
before that,
yes,
do I need to stop sharing for the timing?
No, not needed, sir. Not needed at all. You can keep it like this and I will just introduce you and then you can go ahead. So shall we start from 2 p.m. or shall we start now?
How much time left?
Just 5 minutes left.
5 minutes. Okay, let's wait for 5 minutes.
Yes.
All right.
I think we should wait till 2 p.m. so that all the
All right.
participants can join us.
All right, absolutely. Okay, ma'am,
Okay.
sure. Give you permission,
Yes,
sir?
madam, please go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So I heartily welcome back everyone. A very good afternoon to all. And we are on the last session of this day of the 4th day of our 5-day long faculty development program organized by Computer Science Department of Institute of Engineering and Management, Kolkata. This FDP has been sponsored by AICT. Now talking about Dr. Bapaditya Chaudhary. He is a consultant psychiatrist at Amri Apollo Hospital. Apart from regular clinical practice, Sir is engaged in academic research, corporate and public sensitization and awareness activities. He has research interest in various domains of psychology and brain-computer interface. The topic of this session is art of living, and we are really eager to hear out from Sir as what should be our way of choosing as how to live life. So over to you, Sir.
Okay, thank you for your kind introduction. Good afternoon. Am I audible and visible?
Yes, sir. You're perfectly audible and visible.
Okay. So at the outset, let me extend my thanks and regards to the organizer for inviting me. It's basically my privilege to talk before this august audience. I'm basically the odd one out here in this knowledge fest of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Still, I have been entrusted to deal with art of living. First, let me make a disclaimer. I'm not here to propagate or endorse any program of any house, which will some of us may be aware of. And I am not here to preach or teach or advise regarding issues related to art of living. Rather, I will seek permission from the organizer to modify the topic a bit. My next slide is not visible. Why?
Sir, your slides are visible. That is
Yes.
science. Yeah. Art and science of living.
Okay. I will like to take the permission of the organizer to modify the topic a little bit.
Absolutely,
and
sir.
I would like to share with you, and definitely any comment or suggestion on your part will be highly solicited. And first, let me introduce the perpetual debate between art and science. Basically, since time immemorial, various ways of living has been advocated on the basis of philosophical, spiritual, and sometimes some religious faith houses. But often, certain humanitarian vectors has been main driving force, which mainly rely on aesthetics and value system. On the other hand, if we talk about scientific ways, it is mainly based on reasoning with some empirical ground, and we often seek and rely on evidences, and where robust evidences is not available, we guess on probability what could be the various way out. And as I progress with this uh, debate balancing art and science, I will definitely solicit your views, your comments regarding which way should we employ, should be preferable. Basically, this philosophical, spiritual way of living have often been subjected to various doctrines, various menu that should be employed for healthy living, and it often becomes judgmental, and certain kind of preaching mode is employed. We are aware of various spiritual, philosophical, or religious houses who often guide us regarding various ways of living, what should and should not be done. But on the other hand, the scientific way often talk of taking the perspective of the time, space. It often taken into account of various ethical issues, and basically it doesn't advise or doesn't become judgmental on advocating various policies. And sometimes this utility of various means becomes in the forefront. And of course, it taken some sort of accountability. And there is, if we come into a full form debate, there is a lot of unanswered issues. Overall, the house of art of living has been advocated by various religious or spiritual leaders who often depend on various faith issues, and they try to prescribe certain way for healing of the ailing mind. And it often is dependent on certain kind of assumption and believing of various truth related to lifestyle is taken into account. On the other hand, what could be the scientific way is being searched by our scientific community from throughout the development of this science, and it has been centered on seeking the truth. What could be the ideal way, considering the perspective, considering the overall situation of living? I would like to hear any comment, any point on debate on these issues. Whenever you feel like, please come forward, because there has been lot of debate regarding this way of living. Often it has been instigated in East versus West kind of debate. And very often, a business mode based on both spiritual kind of thing as well as business of various scientific issues takes the upper hand, which will basically define the mode of living should be employed. If we analyze the various prescriptions advocated by the spiritual thoughts, it is based on basically a certain kind of folk psychology, which will come into detail. But rather, a certain kind of scientific wisdom based on scientific knowledge is required to find a scientific way of living. Basically, we study science, we try to learn some of it. But when we need to employ in our day-to-day living, in our crisis time, basically we fail to accommodate this scientific wisdom, scientific thought, scientific rationalism in sorting out this problem. Here comes the conflict. Let me give some examples. If we talk about the art of driving, is it an art or is it a science? And mostly will come into the opinion that basically we need to take into account various scientific strategies when we are basically employing this art of driving. But what about art of dining? Although we may presume cooking to be a sort of chemical reaction, but here certain kind of aesthetic ambience that comes on the most foremost situation that comes forward to guide what should be the strategy for art of dining. For that, we need to employ a certain kind of balance, when deciding for any sort of art in our life to make an appropriate balance. So what I was talking about, various spiritual way of art of living. If you try to find, if you try to Google it, the certain advocacy by the specific house which has basically made this art of living as their tagline, you will not get any definite formula. Rather, millions of followers behind this art of living program, and often another million in monetary terms is involved in this situation. There is certain kind of mysticism behind it. But if you take a brief glance on their program, it is basically talks about relieving stress, It is basically talks about various ways of relaxation and talks about resilience. This term resilience has been advocated by famous psychologist Eric Kraepelin, and these spiritual houses basically grabbed this term and formulated their own way of explaining it. So here we have to decide how can we make a balance between this scientific way of living and the art and spiritual angle behind it. But for this, we have to first recognize our various roles whenever dealing with our personal issues, our issues related to profession, our duties and conflict within family and society as a large, and we are being constantly in a balance between demand and supply our own resources according to this demand. And basically, this demand and supply cause a lot of strain, and we often call it stress. And if you look at the curve, it is very famous Yerkes-Dawson law, which depicts how our fulfillment for demand is met and how it is dependent on various magnitude of stress. On the extreme left side, if there is no stress, if there is no stress, will not it will not be for motivating for any dealing with any issues at all. So to perform, to fulfill our duties, whether in our family, in our profession, we need a little bit of stress, which will motivate, which will guide us to do our day-to-day usual performance. And for certain kind of demand, say before exam, before submission of certain proposal, certain project, before any important issues in our life, an optimum level of stress will bring out optimum performance from us. But if that kind of demand, that kind of stress gradually increases and it prolongs for a long time, the demand is so high that it basically exhaustive, it makes the person fatigued. After a certain point, this performance will gradually decrease with increased amount of stress. It often leads to exhaustion. And if it is further prolonged, becomes severe, becomes more severe, it will be very difficult to find, when it is very difficult to find way out, it will basically incite various negative psychological reactions, anxiety, panic, anger, and in extreme cases, it may cause breakdown in terms of despair, hopelessness, this sort of emotion. And it will definitely hamper performance to the most severe level. But the thing is that as an individual, we have different threshold for tolerance of this stress. And this threshold basically determines the predisposition. And when someone has a basically higher threshold for this tolerance of stress, the person can perform better in spite of being subjected to a comparatively higher degree of stress. But if this threshold is low, one may find it difficult to cope even with mild to moderate degree of demand or stress in life. And this threshold basically explains this stress the diathesis model. And various biological, psychological, and social factors has been explained to explained to determine this threshold. Some families are very much prone, members of some family are very much prone to different kind of stresses at somewhat moderate or mild level. Perhaps there is some genetic vulnerability, and it has been found that certain kind of allelic alteration in particularly brain neurochemical system make a person or a, some persons within the family vulnerable to this stress bearing system. Of course, there has been issues with physical fitness, and the kind of treatment or other medicines the person is undergoing determines one's ability to withstand stress conditions. On the other hand, psychological makeup of a person, how the person is growing up since childhood, how he has been supported by other family members or other situations, and what about the stressful conditions throughout the lifetime basically prepare one to cope with any future stressful condition. And this is our learning system. When this learning system is supported, the person becomes more fit to counter any stress in future. On the other hand, when a person has been subjected to severe stressful situation since growing up, it make one vulnerable to not certain kind of mild to moderate stress as well. And here, the manifestation of this reaction to stressful condition in life will also depend on the support system, support from family, support from employer, and support from his friends and social network will basically either make the person vulnerable or make the person stronger to counter any stressful condition. So, in summary, we have certain biological vulnerability which will basically predispose one to certain kind of stress, whether the person can bear it or not. It can be compared with a weak bridge. If the load on this bridge, which we may compare with stressful situation in life, is a bit lighter, the bridge can withstand that load. But if the load is heavier, the stress is heavier, a vulnerable person may fall weak beside in front of that stressful situation. And this basically determines the spectrum of normalcy and spectrum of various psychological, psychiatric vulnerability and illnesses. If the vulnerability is there, one person may become a bit of worried when standing certain kind of mild to moderate level of stress, whereas a person with less vulnerability may withstand that stress more better, that cope with that stress in a better way. Our aim of this art of living is to make oneself stronger. How we can make oneself stronger by various psychological and social perspectives so that we can withstand this stress in a better way whenever we are challenged. But on the other hand, if we are not able enough to cope with that situation, to cope with that stressful situation, it shows certain kind of reaction to our body. That's why whenever we are subjected to severe kind of stress, we feel certain problem in our body, like beating of heart, feeling of restlessness. In acute stressful condition, this may become unbearable and it may predispose a person to various physical problems whenever the person is facing a form of chronic stress. The problem may appear in any body system. It may cause unexplained pain, including headache, backache, neck ache, limb pain in limbs throughout the body. It may impair our digestive system. It may impair our various endocrine system like thyroid. It may cause diabetes, and the brunt of this crisis is being the various cardiovascular problem as well. We are often discussing that nowadays this cardiovascular problem, diabetes often are increasing. And we often say that increasing stress in day-to-day life is maybe behind this thing. And it is being rightly pointed out. A person who is relaxed will not bear that kind of pressure on their various body systems. And our art of living will basically guide us how to take off this load from our various physiological systems. Let's proceed. And the most important issue of stress is seen on these various brain functions. We often feel, every one of us have felt that effect of stress, we become restless. It becomes difficult to focus on on many particular issues. We often lose the logical trail of events and often fail to show the required flexibility while taking decisions. And it has been shown that whenever we are facing excessive stress, particularly our front of the brain, which is basically the area which helps us to do this higher brain function, how this brain function fails to take appropriate decisions in times of stress. And we will see how learning to relax oneself will improve our focus by increasing the function of this brain system. But before that, we have to acknowledge that every one of us has gone through any kind of excessive stress in life. And it is a normal response to abnormal situation. Any person could have been facing similar kind of issues whenever they are going through similar stressful situation. That's why WHO in 2018 came with a slogan, it's okay not to be okay. And the thing is that we have to identify ourselves, ask ourselves at that unbearable time of stress, am I stressed out? And if we acknowledge the presence of stress in life, and if we can make out that most people will face similar psychological or physical reaction on similar situation, it becomes easier to assess and seek help. Before that, there is lot of misunderstanding regarding this effect of stress on our body and mind. It is often kept with a notion that it is a sign of weakness. One is weak when he feels that abnormal kind of stressful reaction. And often it can be snapped off if anyone shows a strong will. On the other hand, the fact is that almost every one of us in some phases of their life face some kind of abnormal reaction to abnormal situation. And it is intrinsically linked to our various system of our body and mind. And there is a type of continuum where positive health and negative health lies in a spectrum of functioning. And there is definitely, if we feel physically ill, the same sort of weakness, same sort of Help-seeking behavior is required whenever this stress is causing any abnormal reaction to our body and mind. And this reaction will have a certain kind of severity spectrum as well. As a psychiatrist, we basically deal with the severest part of the problem. But a large portion of this problem can be managed when gradually the problem is arising, building up. The thing is that we have to be aware of the situation. What is normal and what is stressful. And this preventive part is most important whenever you try to employ certain kind of strategy for our living. But let me first speak on the severe part. Often when the problem is out of control, out of one's capacity to deal with it, and it is causing severe problem. And this severity do not have any measurable parameter. As we can measure blood pressure and determine whether it is normal and abnormal, this effect of stress do not have any measurable parameter or instrument that can determine whether someone is in the normal or abnormal spectrum. We mental health professionals rely on functionality of the person. That is, as I have said, everyone goes through certain kind of stress in life, and basically at times the stress are very much required in life for our proper motivation and function. But the thing is that whenever a person fails to fulfill one's role in personal life, in professional life, in family or society life, we may think that there is something going on that is preventing the person from doing his regular function, regular duty. And here, with time, if this dysfunction goes on increasing, we have to be aware that something is going on that needs special attention. There are various issues that basically disable to function both in body and mind in this stressful situation. And this stressful situation, when they are in severe condition, that may require consultation and treatment from specialists. Specialists like psychologists or psychiatrists. Let me explain the difference between what psychologists do and what psychiatrists do. Psychology basically is for counseling. Counseling is done by everyone, every person of the society. Friends, family members do counseling day in and day out. But when it becomes a science, when it becomes a science of looking into various problems in a scientific way, making out the various pillars and corners of this problem empirically, and employing certain kind of strategy that will be helpful to alleviate the problem in a strategic manner. We call it psychotherapy. Let me simplify it. In counseling in scientific manner or psychotherapy, a problem is analyzed, the nature and severity of the problem is determined, and on scientific basis, whatever strategy has been helpful previously in dealing with other persons, the experience gathered in various scientific studies, scientific reports is generalized to employ a effective strategy to deal with that certain problem. So, in short, it is the scientific way of talk therapy. But whenever this problem is so much severe that the person is very much distressed, both in body and functioning of mind, we need to take the help of certain chemicals in the form of medicine that will basically stabilize the brain chemicals that go awry at that stressful condition. And on network analysis of various scientific studies for psychotherapy and treatment with these drugs, it has been found that in severe condition, it requires treatment with medicine. But when this problem becomes a bit attenuated or problem is not that severe, psychotherapy is helpful. But in most of the cases, it often requires both treatment with medicine and psychotherapy to give the optimum result. And both psychotherapy and medicine has been shown to revert the brain function as evidenced by various imaging systems of the brain. So, what I was talking about, that in most severe cases, we require help from experts, but on the larger field, we often talk about exercise for physical health. And this is a certain kind of health promotion and also for prevention of severe diseases. Similarly, for mental health, certain kind of strategy will definitely help us to have a more positive way of living, as well as it will help us in preventing further deterioration. It will basically protect us in times of severe stress and on the face of vulnerability. So the most important, the basic part is how to take self-care. It is like putting colors on our day-to-day life system. And as I was discussing about various roles in our life, for personal well-being, certain kind of strategy is definitely helpful. Whenever we face any kind of stress, if we become restless, it will be very difficult to keep our focus on. We call it just relax. Try to relax. Take your time. And this various strategies employed in our personal life, positive strategies will keep our moral high. We need a synchronized physiological system like our synchronizing our biological function, sleeping, our appetite, our capacity to reboot our energy is basically depend on this regular habit of sleeping and our dietary habit, as well as regular habit of exercise is basically makes our both body and mind more able to face challenges at time of stress. We know that physical exercise basically helps to tone up our body system, our heart, our muscles. But the thing is that 30% of the blood that is ejected by heart reaches our brain. And with exercise, we have a feeling that our heartbeat has become faster and we feel rush of blood throughout our body. And remember that 30% of the rush reaches our brain. It helps, any kind of exercise helps to rejuvenate our body as well as our mind. It basically supplies more energy to brain. It causes detoxification of brain, as well as this exercise will release some feel-good chemicals. Various chemicals are secreted during this time of exercise that basically elevates our mood, elevates our spirit. Those who have regular habit of doing any kind of exercise, it may be walk or it may be other kind of physical activity, they often feel a certain kind of low mood whenever they keep their exercise or regular schedule of exercise. They feel a somewhat low in energy and moral. And this feeling is basically due to the lack of feel-good chemicals. They will definitely feel better whenever they get a chance to do their regular habit of exercise. This is for your personal well-being. Similarly, on our professional life, we have our own aspiration. And this aspiration often becomes limitless. It is very important to set boundaries, both in terms of our aspiration for advancement as well as aspiration for money. And we have to take proper schedule, proper break, and need to accommodate in certain kind of positive strategy whenever we need to interact with our colleagues, with our superior. This strategy basically depends on individuals, but certain kind of limit setting for in terms of boundaries, in terms of timeline is very much essential for any person to remain motivated for any challenges in our professional life. Likewise, I was saying we need to take care of our physical health as well, because this physical integrity is very much essential for our psychological function. And this psychological functioning needs a lot of learning, lot of self-reflection, self-awareness, learning to deal with similar stressful situation in our own life or in life of our colleagues, friends. Basically, we learn from others. This is definitely very much required to maintain connectedness with our friends and family and society as a large. And basically, it will lead to our emotional well-being and a certain kind of spiritual, we may call it spiritual, we may call it wisdom, which will basically guide us with advancement in our life. Overall, whenever we face challenges in life, we need to employ the strategy of how to come out of this adversity. And whenever we are facing stress, this resilience is basically our capacity to deal with as adversity. It is like a spring which bends when pressure is on it, but as soon as the pressure is released, it bounces back to normality, normal functioning. And this issue of resilience is basically the strategy to advance despite adverse situation. And it is very important to maintain our positivity in our thoughts. It requires a daily schedule of engagement. It requires proper time management. And basically, our relationship within family, our balance within family, our balance in the working station will give us strength or weakness to deal with certain kind of problem. Overall, with advancing of experience and age, that limit setting, that meaning to certain kind of work will give the motivation and purpose of dealing with it. And for dealing with any problem in crisis or in any day-to-day affair, the relationship between thought and our emotional reaction to this thought and our behavior, what I am doing in that situation, basically determines the outcome in terms of both physical and psychological reaction. If I am in a negative mood whenever in facing a certain situation, it will basically invoke negative emotion for that time. Like I am feeling very low, feeling worthless, and it will invoke a feeling of depression in me, and I will keep myself withdrawn from interacting with other people, and this behavior will lead to feeling of lethargy, feeling of tiredness, often feeling weakness in our body. But if I could hold a positive thought for a stressful situation, like, okay, for the time being, I am feeling distressed, but if I keep on holding patience, I will definitely be out of this situation in a day or other. And this positive thought will raise a hope, a positive emotion, and it will basically guide my behavior. It will basically guide myself to find way. It will guide myself to use my energy, how to keep myself fit, how to keep myself fit in both body and mind. So this cycle is being employed by every one of us. But we need to identify whether my thoughts, my emotion, and my behavior is going in positive direction or negative direction. Likewise, our physical reaction to it will be determined. And it will basically help ourselves as a template to guide whenever we are feeling excessive of stress, excessive of exhaustion in dealing with that kind of stress. And certain kind of thoughts basically hinders our normal function. We often called it thought bias, like selective abstraction. We doesn't see the full spectrum of outcome of an event. We often focus on a particular negative aspect of it, and thereby our feelings, our emotions, our behavior is guided by that particular feeling. And we often personalize issues. We often take burden of the whole issues on our own head. This is due to my fault. And this personalization will basically becomes unbearable. Similarly, we often magnify certain issues which are not that much significant. We often trivialize certain positive issues within one subject. And this magnification and minimization is very common to our day-to-day life. And sometimes we make arbitrary biases in our thoughts. It is beyond any rational thinking, and we often overgeneralize a trivial issues to a larger context. With this issue, it is also important to recognize one's own emotional feeling. The first issue is that recognizing and being aware of our own emotion. Whether I am feeling happy, we can easily recognize it. But am I feeling a little bit of worry, a little bit of low feeling? We often fail to recognize it. And we often recognize when this feeling becomes more severe. It becomes a bit late to deal with it then. Similarly, it is also important to recognize and being aware of others' emotion. It is also important to consider the whole perspective, why the person is behaving like this. What I will do if I am in the position of that particular person. And the ability to modulate emotion accordingly is basically the art to deal with certain kind of emotional outburst excessive anger, excessive frustration, or excessive irritation need to be modulated accordingly in this situation. So overall, the art or science of living is the art of keeping balance between various positive and negative aspects of our day-to-day thought, day-to-day emotion, day-to-day behavior, and the outcome coming out of it. And the main issue at the end of the day is how much I am contributing to myself, to my family, to my profession, and to the society on the larger extent is the most important issues. And when health is absent, wisdom cannot reveal itself, art cannot manifest, strength cannot fight, wealth become useless, and intelligence cannot be applied. This is the issue of importance, and with this, I am ready for any query or discussion or comment from you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, sir. There are a lot of appreciations for you in the chat box. So, yeah, the participants have been saying that it is a very informative session and it is a wonderful session actually. True. And we all have been able to relate from our lives as well as when have we been uh, feeling burnouts and when we were exhausted and stuff like that. So I would request the participants if you have any comments or if you have any queries, you can please post it in the chat box, or all the participants have been given unmute permission. So you can unmute and you can speak up. Participants, if you have any questions, you can speak up. You can unmute yourself and speak up. Else you can write it in the chat box. All right, so I don't see any other questions coming up for you, sir. Um,
Okay.
all right, so I would request Professor Tufan Shah to please share his screen. Yes, sir, actually, since this is a virtual platform and we are not able to physically meet and greet you, so we have prepared a virtual plug for you, a certificate, so that we can greet you virtually. So please accept
Thank you.
this
Thank
small
you.
token of appreciation from our end.
Thank you. It's my privilege and honor to receive your accolade. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you for all your input in this session. So with your due permission, shall we end this session, sir, for you?
Definitely. Definitely.
Or
That's part
okay.
of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for today. And to all the participants, you will be finding your attendance come feedback link in the chat box. The form has been updated in the chat box. I request all the participants to kindly give your attendance now. The form will be logged at 3:30 p.m. sharp. The form will be logged at 3:30 p.m. sharp. So I request all the participants to kindly give your attendance. Please use the same details and the credentials that you have used while registering in the ATAL portal. Thank you, everyone.